What an explosive way to end the season. And boy, talk about leaving you on a cliffhanger. But man, I don't know. I'm still kind of undecided about this one. The Walking Dead Season 4 Finale. A. You mean like as an a-hole?
Well, hello, my brothers and sisters and zombies and fellow members of the Dead Nation. I, as always, am Jim, here to bring you another review, and this one's actually very cool. It's the Season 4 finale of The Walking Dead. And before I get into it, I just want to obviously thank everyone who has followed me along and kind of joined me on the journey this year thus far. Plan on doing Game of Thrones reviews as well, and then during the break between Season 4 and Season 5, maybe going back and actually giving my thoughts and some reviews, you know, on the actual first 3 seasons as well. So keep an eye out for that. But this episode, man, and we'll get right into it over here. The last episode, we wound up seeing it was focused primarily on Daryl and his bunch that he was with, that Joe and those other guys. I guess you could call them the Marauders. I think that's what they've been being referred to as. And then, of course, we wound up seeing at the end Glenn and his group, who wound up, you know, meeting up, of course, with Maggie and Bob and Sasha. That group of 8 all pulled into Terminus, or got into Terminus, and that creepy red-haired lady was like, "Oh, you want some food?" you know? And you just had a bad feeling about it. So that's where things left off, and things pick up over here, right in the token scene that we saw in the last episode, which we saw Rick and Michonne and Carl. Rick's kind of still on the mend. Michonne and Carl are having a good time. And really, we wind up picking up right from that point. But the scene that opens that I thought was the best is they open this up with a flashback. And they had a few of these flashbacks that were sprinkled in throughout the show. And my whole thought on this season is that although it was very character driven and there was it went in depth on several different characters, I believe that for Rick, it was his showing how he tried to bring back his humanity, tried to bring that back and impart that onto his son. And you saw that through these flashbacks, what happened in that time skip between Season 3 and Season 4, how he learned after months to finally go and be able to put down his guns and realize that he doesn't have to be the guy that's always at the front lines killing people or doing the dastardly evil things that you need to do to survive, right? And then, of course, this episode itself, within the first 15-20 minutes, just completely threw that out the window, and it showed you that this world that we live in now, you have to be a monster sometimes. You absolutely have to be a monster, and if you're protecting somebody or you're looking out for somebody that you care for, you might have to go past the edge of sanity and be able to still come back on a daily basis, because some of the things that you may have to see, say, or do are just going to be these despicable acts that would probably haunt you for the rest of your days. But after seeing this, I can say that as a husband and as a father, I would have done the same thing. And maybe not to the same extent, maybe worse, who knows. But nonetheless, I can definitely identify where Rick's coming from. So we see this flashback, and we see Rick initially, and this is when the prison, after the events in Season 3, and we see, again, sprinkled throughout, you know, these flashbacks, just kind of what happened, the interactions between Herschel, this great father figure, and really him kind of being the one that initially was getting Rick to go and put down his guns and telling him, hey, listen, you don't always have to go out on the runs. You don't always have to look out for everybody, you know? And Rick eventually kind of getting into that, because after the loss of his wife in Season 3, he went to a dark, dark place, and then he saw his son going down that path as well, and I think he felt that he needed to go and bring back the humanity and give his son a chance, you know, and that's what he did. But anyway, then we go and we see, before the opening credit scope, we then go and see Rick, and he's all just covered in blood and by himself, sitting, leaning up against this, like, SUV, like an old Bronco or something like that, at the side of the road, and then it just kind of zooms out and it gives us the music and everything, and you're thinking, what the hell happened, right? So then I'm thinking, oh great, flashback, and then flash forward showing us what happens after some kind of events, you know? Now, we know from last episode, we found out towards the end of it that Daryl's group that he's with, and he doesn't even know this, that they're actually hunting after Rick for him going and killing that guy in the house that they were in. Now, these guys, you can argue, are pieces of shit anyway, because they went into that house, saw that there was fresh, you know, clothing and this and that, and that there's female clothing, and they were waiting there for the female, Michonne, to get back so they could beat and rape her. So definitely not good people by any stretch of the imagination. But you wind up seeing, and I didn't think they were going to do this in the first, 5 or 10 minutes or whatever. Rick and Michonne and Carl, they're out, hunting and doing different things and whatnot. And they wind up coming upon this car in the evening, and Carl's going to sleep in it, and Michonne, and he's sleeping, and Michonne and Rick are kind of just sitting there talking to each other in the middle of the road, Indian style, just kind of out in the middle of nowhere, right? And then all of a sudden, right before the commercial break, man, that guy Joe, and I thought it was a dream or something at first, that guy Joe appears with a frickin' revolver and puts it up to Rick's head, and everybody else starts, and all of his other little minions step out of the woods. The thing that initially got me and my wife was like, where the hell's Daryl, right? Well, anyway, we go back to commercial break. When we come out of the commercial break, and I'm taking a lot of time and going in depth on this because I feel that this is really important, that this was really the whole crux of the episode, and really kind of embodies what the whole season was about as far as Rick having to go to that dark place. Some people talk about the next scene, and it was from the comic book and everything else. I've been reading the comic book. It was a passing scene in there that was of no consequence with different characters. It was, Rick and Carl, but Abraham was with instead. It was completely done at a different time in a different space. The only thing that was similar is what Rick did initially to the first guy. Nonetheless, though, the Marauders, or whatever you want to call these guys, they have 6 guys. They got Joe, and they got this five other guys. So what happens is one of them goes over and gets Carl out of the car, pulls him out of the car. Another one's got Michonne with a gun to, he's got a gun to her head or what have you. And then there's 3 more of them just kind of standing around, with their automatic weapons or whatever they have. And they're talking about, you done fucked up now, boy, we're going to get you, and this and that for what you did to Lan or whatever, right? So after a couple minutes of this stuff, and them basically talking about how they're just going to kill them or hurt them or whatever, all of a sudden from around the back of the car out of nowhere, Daryl walks up, right? And Daryl's just like, hey, hold on a second, and the scene was done very well, and to be honest with you, I thought that Daryl was going to get killed all throughout this scene, or somebody was going to get errantly shot or killed or something like that. So Daryl goes and walks up and says, listen, I can vouch for these people, they're good people. And he doesn't say how he knows them or how that he knows them. He doesn't immediately go, oh, Rick, this and that, because he knows it's a precarious situation. He knows this guy Joe is a bad dude, and he knows that these guys want blood, right? So Daryl walks up and goes and throws down his crossbow, walks up to him, and he says, listen, you want blood? Go ahead and take my blood, right? So this Joe goes and he's just like, well, now, see, there's a conundrum, because he done killed one of our people, and you're saying he's good people, and that there's a bald-faced lie, right? So he goes and motions to 2 or 3 of his flunkies, and they grab Daryl and put him up against the car and just start beating the living shit out of him, right? So this goes on for a few seconds, and I mean, it's agonizing, but I can feel what's coming. I hope I know what's coming, right? And you got, Rick is down on his knees, right, with a gun to his head. And he's got this big fat fuck that's over by his son that's kind of holding him down and everything, and you can just see the anger welling up inside of Rick and him just trying to assess the situation and figuring out, how am I going to save my son? 'Cause that's all he cares about. So he goes and he says to this guy, he says, you know what, it's my fault. He goes, it's on me. It doesn't have to do with anybody else, just take me. And he goes, now there's the truth. See, I like that, Then this motherfucker goes, and he's just such a piece of shit scum. And these are the type of people that roam the earth right now. And the only thing that keeps them a little bit hidden away in the shadows is the laws of society and man that we have. You take those away because there's an apocalypse, and scum like this just comes out of the woodwork, man. People like this that hurt children, that kill or rape women, This scum fuck goes and says, okay, he says, well, after we go and we beat Daryl over there to death, we're going to have our way with the woman, then we're going to have our way with the boy, meaning they're going to rape his fucking son, right? Which the fat fuck is already starting to do, and then we're going to kill you, and then we'll be square, right? And I'm thinking, you son of a bitch. Now, to me, that is the most unintelligent thing to do. You don't go and give somebody that has a gun to their head, if you give them some hope, maybe he'd just stand there, or sit there and see what happens and unfolds. You pin somebody in a corner, you pin an animal in the corner like that, and you know that you're going to wind up freaking getting it. So Rick winds up going, and he's got this gun to the side of his head. He winds up going and slamming his head back, and the gun fires over his ear, so he's deaf out of his right ear for a second. Anyway, probably busted his eardrum, and winds up kind of hitting that Joe and knocking him back. As he gets up and turns, I don't know if Rick's hands were done. I know he's still messed up from the prison fight and everything else he's healing, but I can't remember if he was tied or what. But anyway, him and Joe start going into it, right? And while this is going on, there's 3 guys that are beating Daryl to death, okay? And I mean, and then the fat bastard is going, and you hear his belt open, his belt loop going or whatever. He's trying to fucking bang a child, man, you know? Sick bastards. Anyway, as if a wonderful fitting thing, you know, so they're going at each other, and this Joe's like, oh, what the hell you think you're, what are you going to do, boy? And he goes and he grabs on to Rick like he's going to, like, bear hug him or whatever, so they're locked and just in this great bear hug, right? And this is something that was ripped, the scene was ripped straight from the comics, and I didn't know they'd show something like this on national television, right? Rick goes and just fucking like a vampire or a werewolf, just fucking, I mean, right into the side of his throat and his neck, and just tears his throat and neck out and spits it out. His body slumps and drops to the ground, right? And Rick's obviously, he's trying to get, he's still disoriented, man. You know, he's trying to save his son and everybody else, but he can't hear out of his right ear. So anyway, Daryl's still getting the shit kicked out of him. The dude that's got the gun to Michonne's head, right? The other guy that's messing with Carl isn't even paying attention. The dude that had the gun to Michonne's head looks over and he's like, what the fuck? And as he does that and pulls his gun slightly off her, Michonne grabs his gun, turns it up on him, and blows his fucking head off through the bottom of his face. Just wonderfully done, right? Then she grabs the gun and pops one of the guys that's hitting Daryl. Daryl takes that advantage and smashes another one of the guys against the car, and then just like out of Gears of War goes and curb stomps another guy, you know? The guy that's holding Carl down to try to, you know, hurt him, to try to rape him, obviously, he goes and gets up, and he's holding him, and he's got this knife. Don't come any closer, all this and that, to Daryl and Michonne, right? Rick turns, and there's never even a negotiation in his face. There's never even a put it down and I may let you live. There's none of that. This is a feral, fucking bestial father. This is a person who, and people who don't have kids that watch this review, you have no idea what I'm talking about. But when you have children, you would absolutely go to the ends of the earth. I mean, you would go to hell and back to make sure that your child doesn't shed a tear. And I would absolutely tear the fucking throat out of somebody if they ever tried to harm my child. But that's besides the point. But I'm just letting you know that look in his eyes was great. It was just this feral, oh my God. And he goes and just comes right towards him, doesn't even care about the knife, scares the guy so much that the guy drops his hostage, right? He drops his, he's got Carl, he drops his hostage, you know? And Rick goes and he's got a knife, man, and I mean, he just starts sticking him. And he just starts back and forth, just shanking him from frickin' stomach to stern. And I mean, in the throat, in the face. And as he's doing this and the blood's hitting him in the guy's body, he's obviously dead, right? But at this point, he's mutilating him. At this point, Rick has gone past the edge of sanity. At this point, there is no longer a, oh no, we fight the dead and we be cool with the living and we don't shoot the living and all that shit like in season 1 and season 2. This is absolutely, people who have survived this long are mostly not good. Many of them are not good people, and this is the prime example. And Rick goes and just destroys this guy and takes him out. And Carl's standing there looking at him, and I don't know if he's like terrified or if he's like pleased with what he's doing or what. But very, very cool stuff. And then we wind up getting the next morning. So then the next morning we see Rick sitting outside the vehicle or whatever, and Michonne and Carl are sleeping inside of it, and that's what actually happened afterwards, you know. Daryl went off, I don't know what he did, but he comes back, and there was a great scene. Rick's just covered in blood, and Daryl goes and gives him a rag and to clean himself up, and Rick goes, no, I'm fine. And he goes, yeah, but you know what? Your kid inside there, you know, it's not how you look to you, it's how you look to other people. You know, think of your kid, right? You're just covered in blood. So he starts wiping himself up, you know, and Daryl tells him, you know, what happened. He goes, I was with Beth, this and that happened, she's gone now. He doesn't say she was kidnapped, he's like, she's dead, she's just gone, he says. And he goes, you know, so I kind of fell in with these guys. And Rick looks at him and he's like, you know, I don't, so it's cool, man, I don't blame you for it. Because Daryl says, I know they were bad guys, but I figured, hey, man, they got a code, and, you know, I'll stick with them for right now. Daryl was actually hanging back, though, and the reason he didn't appear right away is because he was hanging back and he was going to go and just split from these guys in the middle of the night over here. And then he wound up just coming along anyway around the corner to see who these people were that they happened upon, you know, that they were tracking. And it turns out it was Rick. So if Daryl hadn't been there, everybody's dead, right? But anyway, there was a great touching scene, though, that I thought was really good. And to tell you the truth, I feared for Rick, I feared for Carl, I feared for Daryl, Michonne. I thought any one of them could have gone. I thought that Rick might have been put in an impossible situation where he had to choose one of his children, you know, or like a Daryl and Michonne or something like that, choose one of them to die, and one of them was going to get their brains blown out, excuse me. And, but this touching scene, they're sitting there, and Daryl's talking to him this and that, and he goes, it's all right, man. He goes, you don't got to explain to me. You were alone, you were this, you're that. Because the important thing is, you're here now. That means everything. It means everything that we're back together, right? You're my brother. And I love how he said that, you know, because that's something that I say, brothers and sisters and this and that. And I mean it when I say that. But when I say something like that to a friend of mine that's close, you know, I have brothers. And to tell you the truth, it's a shame because we're not that close anymore, you know. And whatever, there's fault on both sides for that. But nonetheless, though, I thought that it was very touching when he said brother, you know. So anyway, and that's the first 20 minutes of it. So basically what happened is that although I enjoyed this this particular episode, in my opinion, and not to put it lightly, they blew their load in the first 15 or 20 minutes. And not because of the action. The action's great and everything else, but really, we don't see what happened, the whereabouts of Beth at all in this episode. We don't see Tyrese, Carol, and the baby. What we do wind up seeing is Rick and Michonne, and now Daryl and Carl heading on down towards Terminus. As they get close to it, they kind of scope it out from a distance. They see it's this big factory, warehouse, whatever. You can see the big letters of Terminus on the side. Rick goes and takes a bag of guns that they happen to have, extra guns, I guess, and buries them outside the perimeter, thinking they might need them if things go wrong. Instead of coming in through the front door, they climb over some fences and come in through the back way of this factory, and they wind up running into some people, you know. And this guy turns around that introduces himself as Gareth, and he's the leader of these whatever these people I guess you want to call, you know, I guess they're the TV version of, I guess, the Hunters. And to tell you the truth, I've been reading the comic, and there's not a lot there. It's good, but the character development in a lot of ways, at least in issue 70 where I'm at now, is shit. These Hunters that everybody kept talking about, it was a throwaway couple of chapters that they put in there, and it was really ridiculous. I think this is set up much better in the TV show, but they come upon and meet this guy Gareth, and he asks them if they're going to rob them. He says, no, we're just being careful. So he makes them put down all their weapons, Rick and them, so they can see what weapons they have. Then he lets them pick them back up, and he goes and walks them over to the front where that Lady Mary is, right? And he's, oh yeah, and we'll get you something to eat, we'll fix you a plate and this and that. Rick is paying attention. He's wary about everything now. Rick, something snapped after that happened, and he had to do that to protect his son. That's what he has left right now in this world, because remember, he doesn't know his daughter's still alive. He's lost his wife, he's lost his best friend, he's lost many people, but this is the point where he snapped, and he realizes that he has to go into, like, Rambo mode sometimes. And that's what I loved about this. So he's watching the people that are around, because there's some people walking around, and he sees one of them with Glenn's pocket watch, the one that was given to him by Herschel, which we actually see and hear about in one of the flashbacks, because he asks Herschel what time it is, and Herschel says, since I gave Glenn my watch, any time is just now, right? So nonetheless, though, he sees that, and he grabs the closest guy to him, pulls his gun, and puts it to his head, because now he knows that we're in a bad situation here. These people were just luring us in, and the lipstick has come off the pig, right? All of a sudden, people start appearing on the roofs and everything else. He turns, and then the pocket watch for me was enough, right? But then he goes and he turns, and he's just like, well, where'd you get that riot gear? And there's a dude wearing Glenn's riot gear, and they're like, we found it off a dead cop. And they're like, what about that poncho? Oh, found it hanging on like a clothesline somewhere. It's Daryl's poncho that actually wound up somehow with Maggie. But anyway, I was just waiting for them to be like, and look, that's Glenn tied up over there in the corner. So you know, obviously, from last episode that Glenn and Abraham and all of them are there, but now knowing that they have all of their gear and these things and whatnot, you know that something bad has happened to them, right? So, anyway, nonetheless, though, Rick turns right as one of the guys behind him is about to go and fire, and they wind up shooting their own man. Rick and company go running, and it has to be the worst aiming in history. I mean, this is like Stormtrooper from Star Wars bad with the aiming. But then after a couple of seconds, my wife pointed out, she goes, I don't think they're actually trying to hit them. And since these people you find out are these like cannibalistic, or you assume they're like cannibals, and they don't have refrigeration systems, right? They want to keep their prey alive and fresh for when they eat it. So they don't want to kill them. They don't want to wound them. So I believe that they were just shooting at them, and they're pushing them down this one path. And the episode was named A. And at first I was like, what is that for, you know? Is it the Scarlet Letter? But anyway, or actually I don't even know. But nonetheless, though, they wind up getting pushed down. It's Path A is what they are. And it's probably just because this is a big shipping hub or something like that, factory type place. You know, this Terminus, the end of the line type of deal. And it's a big shipping hub freight-wise for trains and stuff like that. So they wind up pushing them down and getting them to this point where they're boxed in. They have no choice but to drop their weapons. And then they go in, and I thought Carl was going to get shot at this point. Carl's standing a little bit away from everybody else. You've got Daryl, and you've got Rick, and you've got Michonne, and Carl's standing a few feet further away from them. And I'm like, oh, shit. And they're like, throw down your weapons. And then they're like, all right, leader, go over to the train car, and that's marked A as well. And, you know, and wait there or whatever. And he's like, no, I'm not going to do that. And they're like, listen, you want us to put a bullet in your son's head right now? Go over and do it, and your son lives. You don't do it, and you both die, you know, so, or everyone dies, or something like that. So Rick goes and walks over there, and then they go and they say, Bowman, you know, or Arrow, whatever. I think they called him Bowman. You know, so they get Daryl. Daryl goes over there, right? And then they say Samurai for Michonne, because she's got her badass samurai sword, right? Go over there. And Carl's just standing there, and I'm like, oh, God, they're going to just fucking shoot him. They're just going to shoot him, right? And they go, and thankfully they didn't. And they says, okay. But it was tense, man. It was tense. I was like sitting there just white-knuckled, you know. And Carl, or, you know, Kid. I think they called him Kid. Go over there. So as he goes closer over there, they go and they make him walk into this train car, right? And as the doors open, or they open the door of it, whatever. Or no, he tells them to open anything. I don't know. Anyway, Rick winds up walking in there, and everybody gets in there. Carl eventually is able to get in there, and they get in. The doors close behind them. They're locked in there, right? And then the season winds up ending shortly after that, and this is the part that pisses me off. He turns, and Glenn comes out of the shadows, and his whole group is in there, right? So the whole 8 of them, man. Rosita, Eugene, Abraham, Glenn, Tara, Maggie, Bob, and Sasha, right? They're all there. So it's great. Reunited, and it feels so good, right? Not really. Now they're in this place, and on their way running through these alleys and buildings and everything else and whatnot, they wound up coming upon, Rick and them wound up coming upon this weird shrine with candles and shit, names of people on the floor. They showed an area with bones that looked like they were picked clean. I don't know if they were rib bones. I know they were human bones. So these people, what they do, as opposed to the half-ass way that Robert Kirkman wrote this part in the comic, these people actually went and set up a system to bring people to them with the different, obviously the train tracks, people coming on the train tracks and just kind of following them along, right? And setting up these signs and everything. And then when people come there, they lure them in, you know, get them to drop their defenses, false sense of security, and then however or another they wind up herding them into these different cattle cars. Because as they were going through, too, there was other people in other train cars that you could hear yelling, help me, help me. So they've got other people there that are just waiting to be eaten, I guess. And this community of how many ever there are, maybe 10, 15, 20, I don't know, it's a bigger force than what was in the comics. This community apparently lures people in and then goes in and leaves them alive, until which time they probably kill them and eat them, you know. And it's a sick, sick world. To me, it would still be easier going and foraging for food at Walmart or whatever, at one of these stores that were around. But that's how it is in here, and that's how this particular group is. So definitely very creepy. But I tell you, at the end, you know, they go in, and then Rick's just like, yeah, well, they made a mistake. And they're like, what are you talking about? I can't wait until they figure it out. And he's like, what? I'm thinking, what? Oh, maybe he's got some kind of backup plan here going, right? You know? No backup plan. Just Rick is crazy now, and Rick's just like, they don't know who they're screwing with. And I saw The Talking Dead afterwards, and I think he wanted to say, I don't know who they're fucking with, but obviously you can't say that on, you know, on AMC, just because FCC regulations and everything. So, nonetheless, though, it wasn't a very powerful ending for me. It was I think you owe us one more episode before the season finale type of thing, because they blew their load in that first 20 minutes. And don't get me wrong, was it good? Yes, it was absolutely. It was wonderful as far as the way the first half of it was played out. But then it was very slow for a little bit. And like I said, I think that it was showing Rick's journey. Because in reality, in hindsight, you have to see this character that's grown from somebody who was just looking for his family to somebody who was finding his family, but he was trying to get everybody to keep their humanity. And even in season 2, that was one of the biggest things that him and Shane butted heads on, was that Shane was just like, he was the one that was like, he was where Rick is right now. We need to kill somebody because we need to kill them, they're dangerous, you know? No questions asked. And Rick was like, no, we gotta save people, you know, we can't just go around shooting people, we're not judge, jury, and executioner. And now he's seeing, after season 3, losing his wife, losing Andrea, almost losing the prison, having all the crazy stuff that transpired with that. And then, of course, season 4, losing the prison here, and that's after he tried to come back from that dark place again. So it's kind of this back and forth, man. His progression has just been like a roller coaster, man, and just absolutely wonderful the way it's been done. So, although I really, truly enjoyed the episode, and it was definitely one of my favorites of the season. I like the mid-season finale, though. I felt like the mid-season finale was more of like a season finale, and I felt like this one was more of like a mid-season finale. So that's just how I feel, the way that things were, you know, kind of transposed and turned around a little bit in the telling of the actual prison arc story, you know, the story arc of the prison. And then A lot of people, you know, have dismissed many of the episodes in the second half of the season, saying they're just filler and this and that. They're not filler. It's called character development. I know it's tough for some people to wrap their minds around, but they actually do that in shows that they want to be long-standing. The shows that last for 8 or 10 or 12 years, it's because they have great character development. It's because you care about the characters in the fictional world. You don't just care about the fictional world or the story, okay? You care about the characters that reside within it. You identify with them. You feel for them, whatever the case may be. And that is, it's not weak storytelling, it's actually strong storytelling. And the way that they really kind of brought things back in this season has set it up for a really good season 5 and 6 and whatever seasons precede that. Because now we have a Rick that is now a formidable foe. We have a Rick that is now, for all intents and purposes, like a 90s action hero, okay? This is a guy who just truly... He's going to be able to, without, because he didn't have regret after he stabbed that guy 40 or 50 times. He was saving his son from being raped. And absolutely, you know. Did he go a little too far with it? No, I think he just wanted to go and prove a point, number one. And number two, I think it was just kind of an adrenaline-flowing, heat-of-the-moment type of thing. And it was basically just like, you are not going to do anything to my blood, you know, to my family, right? So that's kind of what I took from that whole thing. And now that he's able to go and flip that switch on and still come back and like have dinner and be like, you know, just Mr. Nice Rick Grimes, I think that makes him dangerous, and I think that makes him super, super formidable as a foe, as somebody to fight against. The thing that I'm going to be a little bit frustrated about is that 6 months now we have to wait to find out what happened to Beth. We have to find out what happened to, obviously, because as a teaser, as he was walking into the train car, they showed some powdered milk there. So I don't know if that was supposed to be like, oh yeah, you know, it's supposed to make you think for 6 months. Well, Tyrese and Carol and Judith were there, but maybe they've been taken, maybe they've been eaten. They're probably in another train car somewhere. I don't even know. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't, maybe they haven't made it there yet. I'm not really sure, but I can't really see a plausible way out of this that would make sense, that's realistic, that doesn't fall into that 80s or 90s super action movie category. You know what I mean? Really, how are you going to get out of this? There's 10 or 20 armed men. You know what I mean? You've got your bag of guns that you've got stashed out in the woods somewhere, but you're trapped, you're locked in a train car, you know? There's a dozen of you, yeah, that's great, but, you know, really, I don't... So, like I said, I want to see how they can... I hope they didn't write themselves into a corner with this one and then make it real hokey and cheesy, you know, as far as when it comes in for Season 5. So, but all in all, I thought it was a great season. I'm going to be putting up some more videos, too, on different season wrap-ups, my predictions, my thoughts, characters, stuff like that. So, make sure to, you know, to obviously keep a lookout for those as well. Feel free to leave in the comments down below any suggestions, too, for video topics that you might want to might want me to do as far as, you know, comparison of a certain character between the comic character and the you know, the TV show, or really anything that you can think of. Leave that in the comments down below. But I guess my episode question for you is going to be kind of an all-incumbent one. I would like you, brothers and sisters, to let me know what your thoughts were on this season as a whole, and then this episode as well. What did you think about my assessment of this season really being about Rick's trying to return to normalcy, but ultimately finding that can't happen, that he does, because you got to remember, and he got the shit kicked out of him in the mid-season finale by the governor, you know. Now, he was still healing from the fight with Tyrese and everything, and obviously he unleashes the monster sometimes, which he tried to explain to Daryl, but he's like, I'd do anything to protect my son. That's all that matters to me. And Carl heard that too, which I thought was great. We also wound up having a little bit of backstory too that I forgot to mention about Michonne. And she talked about it. It was great the way it was done, because she confided in Carl and she told her that those 2 pets that she had with her, that was her boyfriend, her baby daddy, and his friend. When they were in this refugee camp, she had went out, they were watching, the 2 guys were watching the son. She went out for a run with some people for supplies. When she came back, the fences were down, zombies had obviously gotten through, and she wound up finding her boyfriend and his friend. They were dead. They were turned into zombies. They had been bitten, whatever. But they were high as fuck. So I guess these guys, apparently, instead of watching the kid, they were high. So what she did is, that's when she wound up cutting their arms off and taking their teeth out and everything, cutting their lower jaw off so they couldn't bite, and keeping them around to disguise her from other zombies as pets. And in a way, it was like her own penance for being stupid and leaving them there. And in a way, too, it was like their penance for like being eternally damned for being morons, and wound up losing her, you know, her son's life because of stupidity, you know. So it was very cool to see her open up too and tell Carl about that, and I really really surprised I forgot about that, because that was one of the most, I thought that was one of the most fitting, touching moments of the series, because she was trying to explain to Carl, you don't need to be afraid of your dad. Sometimes you have to go to a dark, dark place, but he's doing it for the right reasons. Let me tell you that, you know. And it also talked about how she was on the precipice, standing over, looking into the abyss, and she wound up being able to come back. But for a very long time, until she ran into Andrea, she was very much just alone in the world, and it was like her own. She felt like she was in her own purgatory for what had happened, you know, and blamed herself, obviously. So, but again, let me know what your thoughts are on the episode itself. You know, Michonne's background, you know, her history, her background that we heard, and then of course Rick, as well as his development and what happened and what I thought the kind of apex of this season was. Let me know maybe what your favorite episode was. Just get some conversation going in the comments down below. Feel free to hit the thumbs up, the like button if you should think that I deserve it, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. We will look forward to catching all of you in the next one, Nation.
I thought this drawing that I made some time ago at the beginning of the season would be quite fitting for this episode due to its content, but also remember to follow me on my other channel on Twitter and Facebook as well.